All right. All right, we are replacing the driver's side front CV axle on this 2010 Mazda 3. Well, actually, we're not replacing the CV axle, we're replacing the CV axle seal. It is leaking, as you can see down here on the ground. We're losing a lot of transmission fluid. So we're gonna go ahead and get to that. First thing you need to do is remove the tire. That is a 21 millimeter. Alright, next we're going to be removing the CV axle nut. It is a 32 millimeter. Go ahead and check your CV axle for play. You see ours comes out nice and easily. If your CV axle is not flowing easily like this one, you might need to go ahead and put your CV axle nut on here a couple turns until it's flush with the head of the CV axle here, and give it a couple taps with a hammer to see if you can't knock that loose a little bit. All right, next we're going to be removing the lower ball joint nut and bolt. It is a 14 millimeter on both sides. If you have trouble getting the bolt the rest of the way out, what I usually like to do is grab it with the, like you just saw there, adjustable wrench or some pliers, and just give it a little tug. Make sure once you have them off, you put your nut back on the bolt. A couple turns, make sure you don't lose either. Get yourself a nice size hammer. And usually we just look for a good spot that has good clearance. You can kind of see, if I can get the camera set up right, you can kind of see how there's this arc stepping out right here. There we go. Now with the lower ball joint separated, the CV axle should be able to be pulled out. All you need to do is turn the wheel. If it gets jammed up a little bit, just give it a wiggle. And there you have it. The CV axle is now free from the steering knuckle. Let's come around to the back of the CV axle right here. You can see there's a small groove right here. And get yourself a decent pry bar. This is the biggest one that I have. I don't know where my bigger one went. What you're basically going to want to do is put it up inside of here to where it's got a good bite on it. Give it a couple whacks. With the CV axle loose. You never really know which type of vehicle is going to pertain to, but it is likely that you will lose your transmission fluid, or a good portion of it at the very least. So now, with the CV axle out of the way, you can see it's still draining out. I'm gonna go ahead and just keep working on it. I don't really care that it's draining or not. Try to keep as much fluid in there as I can if I can finish this job up quickly. To remove the old CV axle seal, they do make tools for this, but a flathead screwdriver and a hammer will get the job done. Go ahead and just pick a side. right in there gently and work your way to pushing that seal out. It's often better if you can get it from multiple angles, but with how this thing is in the transmission, I don't believe that's going to happen. So go ahead and twist this, the screwdriver as I'm prying. And there's the CV axle seal. Go ahead and lube it up around the edges. Oh, actually, I must have made a mistake. It looks like the spring came off that CV axle. And without that spring, it won't hold pressure. So it looks like that's what happened to our CV axle seal. Oh, the seal broke. Oh, the spring broke. This goes around the inside. If you can see right here on the new seal, you can see that little spring going all the way around it. That's what this is. Without that spring, it won't retain tension on the CV axle, and you'll get a slow leak as it sits. You want this ring to be on the oil side, so it goes inwards. I'll get a nice soft hammer, give it a couple whacks to get it started. And if it looks like it's going in well, which looks like ours is, go ahead and just finish that job on up. You want to kind of tap it around the edges as you're putting it in, and just do little hits. No big hits. Big hits are going to mess stuff up. And there you have it. Your new CV axle has been seated. There, I like that. Looks good. And now we can begin the reinstallation. Installing the new CV, or I'm sorry, not the new, reinstalling the CV axle. Be careful not to grab hold of the new CV axle seal. And a quick tip, when you're trying to get it seated back inside of the transmission, go ahead and get your CV axle nut, put that down till it's flush. Hold this out of the way and push in on the CV axle as you give it some light taps. You hear how that sound changed? Let's go ahead and hit this bad boy up with some brake clean, because transmission fluid smells disgusting. And we can begin the reinstallation into the steering knuckle. Just straightforward enough. I probably don't even really need to make a video about this part, but just in case. Pull your steering knuckle away. Turn your CV axle and line it back up with the steering knuckle. Once this is seated inside the steering knuckle and all of your teeth are lined up between the steering knuckle, or I'm guessing that that's actually the wheel bearing hub, and your CV axle teeth are lined up, pulling down on your lower control arm. Actually, it looks like we're gonna have to rotate this. Stop fighting me. CV axle day. I'm trying to fix you over here. Alright. And I actually just did this with my hand a couple times, and I was able to get the lower ball joint reinstalled. I'm gonna go ahead and make sure it's lined up properly down the hole. Go ahead and put that bolt and nut back in. 14 millimeter again. There we go. Good and tight. Rotating your rotor back to its neutral face. Grab the CV axle from behind and push it forward. Installing the CV axle nut. Go ahead and get yourself a chisel or a flathead screwdriver or whatever you got. And bend that back in place into that little groove on the tip of the CV axle. And that acts as a little lock so that nut doesn't come loose by accident. And that's pretty much all there is to it. Reinstall your tire, top off your transmission fluid, and hope this helps you out. Don't forget to like and subscribe.